Hi, my name's Lindy and welcome to this channel. My website is www.lindycowling.co.uk and my email is info@lindycowling.co.uk. I hope you are doing well in these unusual times that we are in. If you are still under virtual house arrest, on lockdown somewhere in the world, I hope you're coping okay and not going too far down the rabbit hole of fear or anything like that. And if you are someone that has been unwell but is feeling a lot better now, that's great news. And if you are someone that's worried about a loved one, my heart and prayers go out for you and to you. So I'm bringing this video out. I plan for it to be a fairly short video, between 15 to 20 minutes. Let's see how it goes, because I want to go straight on and record a video for my dear patrons on Patreon. So the title of this video comes about because, as you know, this is an experiential channel, which means I only comment on, talk about, share, channel, or really teach about things that I have first-hand experience of, witnessed, been through, passed through, or worked with thousands of clients with these processes over a 20-year period. So the title of this video today is Twin Flame, Sacred Rose, Stargate and Vortex. Twin Flame, Sacred Rose, Stargate and Vortex. Now, if we go back to what I just said before, I only talk about things that I have experienced firsthand, that I am witnessing, have gone through, or are helping others with. So, first of all, let's talk about the rose and the rose codes and the rose line. These are terms I've been using on this channel for a number of years, not very often, but if you look back at the videos on my channel, quite a few years ago I was talking about one to do with rose codes and a particular frequency. There's one on there called Shine Bright Like a Diamond, when I was talking about accessing diamond consciousness. Again, all coming from having done it and going through it myself, but witnessing in others also. And that is something that keeps cropping up now and again. And rose and roses having huge symbolic meaning anyway, but very huge to me. That name is prevalent throughout the family, always connected with healers in the family. My grandmother, who is over the other side, she died many years ago, was a very well-known healer and channeler and medium, particularly in the United States as well as England. So she had her own healing centre, and she was the first healer in the world to be tested at Stanford and UCLA universities there, to prove scientifically that molecular structure of objects or liquids could be altered when in sealed test tubes. So she was able to do that, and also the first in the world to be wired up to the mind mirror by Dr. Maxwell Cade. So this was a scientific experiment to show that there is an absolute alignment between the channeling of healing energies to a patient or client and how they come into resonance or harmony with one another. And it's at that point of resonance or harmony that the receiving of the channeled energy can take place. So this was all measured scientifically, and she was really big on that side of it. It's probably where I get it from. She loved to be able to back up what was being done by science. So the world of quantum science now is the nearest we can come to that. Quantum science really is hugely implicated in the work that we are doing nowadays, and it's the closest thing really to proving that the metaphysical and the woo-woo is in fact real. Those of us that have worked in it for 20-something years and more know this, but it's wonderful that there is this merge in the middle where science is catching up and quantum science is, you know, completely rolling over and merging in this kind of area that I'm talking about. So Sacred Rose, Stargate and Vortex. Rose and roses coming up over and over again on my journey. Particularly it seemed to be indicated and connected in a certain way of opening up. It seemed to be in the ancestry, it seemed to be in the bloodline. And then my grandmother's name was Rose, Rose Gladden, and implicated in this. Then it went down to my mother, who was Margaret Rose. And so the roses kept coming one way or another. Then for a while I was working, or kept being given symbolically when I was working, and working on portals globally, which I haven't really shared on this channel, which means doing land and area work, passing souls or spirits, or opening portals in certain areas to clear stuff through and allow a cleansing of the air, etc. And yellow roses and golden roses were coming up significantly, and imagery of being handed and gifted yellow roses or golden roses. And in some of the work that I was doing then, and a friend of mine, Sue, who was doing some of that work with me at that time, I was drawn to go to a store and get yellow or gold roses and, you know, sprinkle the petals of them about and on the water that we were working on. So it goes on, this theme, this continuous theme, yellow gold roses. Then my beautiful, beloved, dearest companion cat died of cancer, as you know, in January, very suddenly, very shockingly. He was only 6. And 2 nights before he died, I'm walking in a garden of yellow roses. Then he dies. Then a dear client does me a portrait. She doesn't know that I've dreamt of the garden of yellow roses, and she does this portrait, and there are yellow roses in it, and my cat has his paw resting on the stem and a single yellow rose. So it goes on, roses, 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 and the symbology of this. So then in the course of the last few weeks, numerous times that I've been working with clients, this theme of the rose keeps coming up. I have been seeing roses that rotate. They rotate in this kind of fashion in certain clients' energy fields. It's been coming up in a very synchronistic way, and then really within the last about 7 days, different pieces of the puzzle have come together. This is how it often is with me. And the realization, it's almost like another piece of the puzzle, which is how it is when you're on these journeys, that this rose is an aspect of one's consciousness, and where it links to twin flame ascension templates is on the number 1, the ascension template side of it, the raising of consciousness from one's head to one's heart. Number 2, the balance within oneself, inside oneself, of one's masculine and feminine energy to blend and merge to come into a unified state of union, 0 point field of energy. So that's hence the twin flame aspect of it, all happening internally. The rose aspect of it being an aspect of one's consciousness that one becomes the embodiment of, not just having to, let's say, be able to tap into or dip into, like we can dip into and tap into archetypal energies. I mean when it becomes the embodiment of one's consciousness. And over the last 2 weeks, as that has started to become the case here, I've been able to see within clients' energy fields their representation of consciousness that's on a gravitational or generational gravitational field within their energy fields, and sometimes this has been presented as a rose, and all the bits came into place to do with this all being connected to one's Merkaba, one's time travel vehicle, all in one's consciousness internally, and a Stargate, all really merging into one, which means that as one becomes the embodiment of these states of consciousness, because we are in the time of the now grid is now here, as I keep repeating since we hit January 2020. The now grid is real, it's now here, people are becoming the embodiment of it. It's a creationary grid rather than the linear, highly, heavily programmed reactionary grid. This is a creationary grid where one is able to participate in creating the reality as one gets into the swing of it, as one becomes the embodiment of it. That grid is completely implicated in this. It supports the Vortex and the Rose Stargate. It's all interwoven and merged with that grid, and all of that is also merged as part of Earth. There is no separation between the creationary grid, planet Earth, let's say this representation or presentation of one's consciousness when one is becoming the embodiment of it. So at the heart of that creationary grid is Earth. Earth is on board with it. It's Earth, and people going through that are at the matching frequency specific. As an entry point to this, I don't feel it's the only entry point to it. I feel that there are other ascension templates, but I can comment mainly on the ascension template I have the experience in. If one has entered for a twin flame template, it's regardless of whether you've met a twin flame or multiple ascensionary partners or ascensionary soulmates, matching consciousness, catalysts, whatever, it is all still being done internally. All happening internally in your consciousness. So the balance of masculine and feminine energy creates a unified or state of union, unified 0 point energy inside, all happening inside the heart, the metaphysical heart portal where your ladder or rungs of highest consciousness are. Within that there is and are stargates. Stargates where one can travel, bursting through the illusions of time, space and reality. One can travel in one's consciousness, and I highly suspect in one's actual reality. I can't say that for sure yet, having not actually done it, although no, that's not entirely true, and I'll tell you, I'll follow that up in a minute. What I can say is one can enter aspects of one's consciousness where one can time travel in one's consciousness, access multiple dimensions, timelines, realities, on planet, off planet. It's a stargate, an embodiment of a certain kind of consciousness that is interwoven with that balance, ascending, enough of your consciousness being in the heart. It's all interwoven with Christ consciousness, and it's interwoven with portals or vortexes within oneself. A Stargate or stargates within oneself that one has used before. So when one discovers it, really one is rediscovering it. It's like being an archaeologist that has just discovered something at the Great Pyramids or in the desert. When one discovers it, it isn't really like discovering it for the first time. It's like, oh yeah, sure, I know that. It's like remembering. It's like a great remembering from a great divine amnesia. So when one discovers it, one really becomes more of the fullness of that embodiment, and it is like echoes of what one knew anyway. And when I said earlier that could one actually physically use these stargates and the Sacred Rose Stargate to actually time travel, well, I've shared this story before with you, and I will share it again for those of you that didn't hear it, because I shared this story maybe 5 or 6 years ago when I first started out on this YouTube channel. When I was around a masculine representation of this energy, in other words, a male twin flame, way back in 2010 and 2011, on the earlier stages of my journey, one day we walked into a British pub, sat down, and we already had some awareness of other experience of ourselves as consciousness in other timelines and realities, what you would call past lives. We now know they're other timelines and realities. One of these timelines and realities was living in 1930s Boston as a very unsavory character called Johnny Boy and a very fragile character called Kathy. So it was a very violent, very passionate, tumultuous relationship in 1930s Boston. When we walked into that English pub and sat down, the energy in that pub changed, and for about 3 to 4 minutes we suddenly began to lose being in the pub and started to be seeing, smelling, tasting, feeling with all our senses the reality of 1930s Boston. It was as if we were starting to come out of the pub reality in 2011 and go into the 1930s Boston one. There was a man sitting in the corner of that pub that looked exactly like the representation of Johnny Boy, dressed like it, everything. The music playing over the speakers sounded like 1930s music. Suddenly the pub didn't smell like a pub, it smelled intensely of coffee. It smelled like the diner, an actual memory of the diner that we had been in. And we looked at each other and said, are you experiencing this? Are you seeing this? Are you getting this? And we just burst out laughing, because you couldn't make this up. And who would believe you? That lasted for 3 to 4 minutes, and when we came out there, we felt like we'd just got on a fairground ride and got off again. It was incredible, and that was way back then. So really what I feel what we experienced then, which I called it a time slip into that reality, well, that was partially true, but really I understand how it happens now. It's an aspect of one's consciousness within that we can access, rather like a Stargate or a vortex or a portal, that we can go into and are influenced by and affected by all our other timelines and realities. And I suspect I'm only just scraping the surface here. I suspect we can all get to a point in our evolution where we can actually actively use these within us. And this is something that's available to all. I'm commenting on my entry point to it because this is an experiential channel. One does not have to have had the same experiences as me to experience something like that, and yet it's pretty amazing. So it is something that's available to all, that we all have this capability, and perhaps this is going to come to the fore for humanity more than perhaps ever before, because the now grid is in now. The quantum heart creationary grid is tangibly, physically here. This is what has triggered the global events, because those that do not want humanity to remember this and have the great remembering that they can access their own vortexes and stargates, and that they are so much more than they feel that they are in personality. Those that don't want you to remember that aren't very happy about this huge grid being activated within people, and are trying to sort of make things difficult because they're not happy about it. And yet it can't be stopped because so many have done it and are doing it and are on that path. So it's a very exciting thing. I can only comment on the ones I know about for experience, and I've said this time and time again. My life and my channel would have been a darn sight easier if I'd have just randomly channeled or read loads of books and then quoted from those books and did it that way, but then it wouldn't have been experiential. And this channel is a template. It means how can people imprint on it or resonate with it or be inspired by it if I'm not actually doing it myself and walking the walk and being very honest and very human with it. After all, we are doing it in the human vessel. So it's made it a lot more difficult and slower, and it's probably kept my viewing figures down by millions less than they would have been, because I'm doing it step by step. And yet that's the way it was always meant to be, clearly for me and clearly for this channel. So I'm commenting on the rose one because that is something that seems to have been interwoven with all of this, and I'm commenting on the twin flame template being that entry point to the unified state of inner union, because that's been my entry point, and that began back in 2010 going into 2011 onwards. So it's very exciting, and I've seen it in people that aren't on a twin flame trajectory. So this is not just applicable to someone that's met a twin flame or thinks they're with a twin flame. I've seen this happen and within people's energy field that haven't gone down that route in this lifetime so far, and perhaps never will. But it is evidence of their own evolution of consciousness and their own stargate and vortices. In other words, everyone has this. Everyone has it within them. Absolutely everyone. And it's very, very exciting that we're now starting to see the evidence of it. And on that note, I'm going to love you and leave you. As always, thank you very much for subscribing to this channel. Anyone that is inspired to donate, gratefully received, thank you. Look after yourself. I'm going to go straight on to record a video for my patrons on Patreon, and I'll see you guys again soon. If you do celebrate Easter in any way, obviously it's Good Friday today. Have a lovely Easter weekend. I intend to try and get some well-earned rest. So see you again soon. Bye guys, bye.